Jigoro Kano wanted to spread judo as a physical education tool and a self-improvement tool to the world. Kano saw how dangerous Japanese jiu-jitsu was, and the things that were taught to the military and the police force sometimes end up with broken bones or sometimes killing with these certain techniques. So we wanted to take Japanese jiu-jitsu and make it a little bit more practical and provide a little bit more of a safer environment so that anybody could practice it.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome back, or maybe for the first time, to Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio. On today's episode, I'm joined by Cole Stanley. Cole, thanks for being here. We'll start this chat in just a moment. And to the audience out there, thanks for being here. Thanks for spending some time with us. Martial Arts Radio is the world's top traditional martial arts podcast. We bring you 2 episodes each and every week. And part of the way we're able to do that is through support from our sponsors like Kataro, KATAARO.com. That's where you go to find Kataro, makers of the best stuff. They make some great stuff. Everything's made in the USA. They've got a few things that they wanted me to tell you about this time around. They've got this great new pagoda-style desktop belt display, which is super cool. They're constantly adding embroidery options. So, you know, the thing Kataro is known for most is their belts. We did a belt in collaboration with them. You can find that on their website. But if you check out what they're doing, it's all great quality stuff from great quality people, and we are thankful to be in partnership with them. And I'm thankful to be here spending some time with you, Cole. How is it going?
Wow, life couldn't be any better, like I was telling you earlier.
Yeah.
Any of these opportunities to where I'm able to spend some time with other martial artists, picking each other's brain, having discussions, talking about the philosophy, the technique, whatever it might be. It's always something that I really enjoy. So this is an awesome opportunity. Very excited to be here. And obviously, thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you for spending some time with us. And, you know, I think one of the hardest jobs I have is deciding how to start our conversations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick at something that you just said, sharing philosophy. You know, not every martial artist is super into the philosophy of what we do. A lot of martial artists it's all about the training or the techniques or the next form or whatever. But you brought up philosophy, so I'm going to guess that that's important to you. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely is. And I was thinking about this earlier because I also have a podcast, and I found a Kenpo karate sensei that I really liked on TikTok, and he does nothing but talk about philosophy and the deep roots of martial arts. And yes, Kenpo karate and judo are different, but they're also the same, right? That continuous pursuit for perfection, self-perfection. And
is that Michael,
when
by
I
the way,
think back
you're
about
referencing?
things, no, his name is the Sensei Thompson is what his name is.
I thought that's who I'm thinking of. Maybe his first name's not Michael. He's got a really deep voice.
Yeah, it might be.
I think we're talking. I think we're talking about the same guy. Yeah. He's a great guy. Yeah, keep going. I'm sorry.
No, absolutely. So he has like some tigers and stuff in the background. He's like in a dojo type atmosphere. So as far as philosophy, and I thought about this question earlier because when I have Sensei Thompson on, I'm going to talk about philosophy. To an extent, potentially deeply. It depends on how the conversation goes. But I think the longer you spend in the martial arts or trying to find something that you're perfecting throughout your lifetime, when you're younger, you are just going through the motions. And, when I was training judo, coming up from a teenager and competing, I really didn't realize the lessons that were being taught to me. You were able to come back and reflect on what you've learned over time. But as you're going through it, sometimes you don't realize things are happening and the mindset is shifting and you're learning to become a better person. over time, and it helps out with your confidence. And I mean, there's so many other realms that it could go into. But I'm definitely more into the philosophy aspect as of now. And as I get older, I'm 43 now. This is year 25 for me in martial arts. I heard something the other day, and it talked about how physically you're able to do techniques, and especially these big dynamic techniques like, like such as judo, some of these big throws, and eventually the body is not going to be able to do the throws as they once did. You might not be able to do the throws at all if maybe you have some
Mm,
sort of injury, or whatever the situation might be. But your mind is going to continue to get sharper. And the things that you learn through martial arts are going to be translated mentally. So as the techniques start to fade, the mind and the deep thought and the philosophy of martial arts is going to come through, especially if you decide to continue to do that on as a lifetime activity.
for sure. So if I did my math right, you started judo in your late teens, right? 18, 19?
17.
I, okay. I don't know too many people who start judo at that point. I mean, put aside for a moment the fact that judo is far less popular in the West than it is globally, which is it fascinates me. That's not an age where a lot of people get going in judo. Is this a college thing? Well, 17, probably not. How'd you get started in
So,
judo? Wait.
so, and I just was talking about this the other day. I was a guest on a different podcast called the Tatami Talk, and had a
Mhm.
good time on that show as well.
Nice.
So when I was younger, I grew up in a very small town, and coming up through the 80s and stuff. Of course, the internet wasn't there. It was almost like a world that was kind of shut off, right? Like
Mm.
the kids today are much more globalized, much more, cultured of the world than I was. I mean, if it didn't happen within my little town, or I saw on the television, then I really didn't know anything about it, right? Unless I obviously saw it in a book or something like that. But I watched professional wrestling when I was a little kid, and was pretty heavy into that, and really
Mm.
enjoyed it. So of course, me and my friends would, do the moves to each other and things like that. And then um, I do have a younger brother and sister that I would also practice the moves on, of course. And we
I'm
had
sure your parents loved
somebody
that.
move into our town. Yeah, his name was Adam, and he, just again, coming of a class of, like 20 people. Obviously, you
Mm.
get to know everybody in your class pretty well, and you become friends with people pretty well when you're in such a small town like that. And he said that he wrestled when he was in middle school. And I'm like, okay, I really didn't know what that meant. I'm like, okay, so you did stuff like WWF. And he's like, no, it's real wrestling, and I don't remember the conversation exactly, but I'm like, oh, okay, sure, like what is that? He's like, oh, it's similar. So he would show me moves, and we would do little tussles, and sometimes get out the boxing gloves and stuff. But I mean, I didn't know anything about what I was doing, but I kind of liked it. Of course, it kind of sucked because I didn't know what I was doing, and I was just getting absolutely dominated, right? Because I mean, anybody that's done any sort of martial art or wrestling, if you are a complete beginner and don't have any clue of what's going on, I mean, it's really difficult to pick up right away.
Sure.
And so I wanted to wrestle, and I got into high school and wanted to see if I could get onto a wrestling team. Well, again, being from such a small town, my high school didn't have wrestling. So the same friend, Adam, mentioned judo. And again, like I don't remember the conversation, but I doubt that I even knew what judo was. But he said it's very similar to wrestling, but you wear a gi, big thick jacket, and it's something that you should try. If you want to do wrestling, and we don't have it at the high school, try that. I have a couple of cousins that do it. So I went to a judo club at 17, I had just graduated high school, actually. And, long story of, I tried to meet with the principal, see if we could do like a co op, see if I could go wrestle for another school. And, the answer was no.
Mm,
So I decided to do that. And again, it's like the resources of today are a lot different, right? You couldn't just go onto Google and search, where's the nearest wrestling club or where's the nearest judo club. It wasn't really like that. It was all kind of word of mouth. And so I started judo at 17, and 25 years later, I'm still involved with the art, and
mm,
I love it, and I teach it now, and I don't compete anymore, but I competed for about 10 years, and yeah, it's awesome. And now I'm to the point in the martial arts journey to where I'm giving back, and not only do I teach it a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu club. I teach there twice a week, but I'm in the process of opening my own dojo in my front yard. I actually
cool.
had a 1,200 square foot building
Oh, that's great.
built, 30 feet from my front door, and I'm getting ready to open hopefully in the next month or so. Um, but yeah, it's interesting because I take this full circle, and back to the philosophy question again, like you hear about some of this deeper stuff as you're coming through and when you're young and you don't really understand it. And, the whole thing about, like parents or educators saying you'll understand when you're older, you understand when
Mm,
you're older. I really didn't know what they meant, but now I do. So it's all become full circle to me. And I'm to the phase in my martial arts career to where I'm giving back as much as I can.
nice. So I'm curious, coming into judo, probably not knowing, as you said, not knowing very much about it, with at least an understanding of professional wrestling and that seeming like it might be the closest thing to getting out there in between the ropes. What were those early days of judo like for you? Was it what you had hoped it to be, or maybe something else?
I mean, I try to, like think back of stuff. And whenever I'm teaching technique and things like that, I tell my students like all the time, I'm like, I have no clue where I learned this from.
Mm,
Like this particular way to do a hip throw or a single arm shoulder throw or whatever it might be, this gripping sequence. Most of the time, I can't remember, where I learned it. I wish my memory was more like that. So I don't have a vivid memory of what it was like in the beginning, but all I remember is that it took me a long time to learn,
mm,
and I was not very good at first. I mean, I'm still not good, but I remember that it had been, a year or 2 years before I legitimately took down somebody that was not a white belt. Now, obviously, when you got two brand new white belts going against each other, somebody gets luckier. They both kind of trip at the same time, and somebody goes
yeah.
down. So you could consider that a takedown or a throw. But somebody that had been doing it for 6 months or a year, I mean, I did not get a single takedown or a single throw or a single foot sweep or anything for a year, maybe 2 years.
Mhm.
And then so I had, like a choice to make, right? It's either I just give this up because I'm not good at it, or I just stick with it and kind of see what happens. And I decided to stick with it. And I haven't been doing judo for 25 years straight, but I also have coached wrestling. I also do
Mhm.
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And there probably hasn't been a time longer than maybe 6 months, I would say, within that 25 years to where I was not on the mat at least once or twice.
Wow.
So it's been on and off kind of, but, I'm involved in a lot of things. And, if you know any coaches at the high school level, you know how much of a commitment it is to
Yeah.
be a successful coach and be there for your athletes and try to give them every opportunity you can. It's hard to fit in another activity. So most of the time when I was doing wrestling, I didn't do judo. But there was some years to where I would be doing judo up until wrestling started, and then start judo as soon as wrestling was done. And other times, I might not go back to judo for a couple months or whatever it might be.
So when did wrestling work out? You started judo because you couldn't find wrestling. How did you end up finding wrestling?
Yeah, so as far as my introduction to wrestling, um, remember, like I said, my friend Adam had shown me a little bit about it, and he had several cousins that were big into wrestling. One was a multi-time state champion in Illinois, and he was also a black belt in judo.
Hmm.
And his name was Tommy Lakier, and he was a black belt at the club that I first started in Yorkville, Illinois, the Yorkville Judo Club. So, back then in the 2000s, leg grabs were still allowed in judo. Not that we practiced them a lot, but they were still there and it was still an option. And I know that, Tommy obviously was very, very good at leg attacks and things like that. So I would see them. So, what led me to wrestling? So, besides practicing it a little bit in judo and doing it in my backyard, or doing a little bit of maybe like you can call it cross training, maybe within the judo dojo, like wrestle around with Tommy or some other people that had wrestling experience, I decided to get into education. I was a public school teacher for 16 years. I'm not currently, but I was for 16 years. And I was a PE major and real big into sports, played a whole bunch of sports growing up. And wrestling was about the closest thing to judo. And I just love grappling, period.
Hmm.
And I mean, wrestling is a martial art. So I love martial arts. I love grappling. So I wanted to get involved in wrestling. And it literally started out with me being a volunteer coach for a long time. And as the coach was showing moves, I would be learning along with the wrestlers. And then I would wrestle the kids every single practice.
Hmm.
So I kind of went through the grind and the learning process right alongside the wrestlers, even though, I was in my early 20s. And then that led to later on becoming a head coach, but it took a long time, and I was taking the lumps just like the kids were, and I was getting taken down and I was getting pinned. And there was times to where, I was doing judo and throwing them, and because that's all I knew at first was judo. And then I slowly just picked up wrestling and understood the rules. And being involved in judo and grappling, I understood the principles of, body manipulation and affecting balance. And I mean, judo is a lot like wrestling as far as the grind and things like that, working when you're exhausted and getting
Sure.
beat up and getting slammed on your back and everything like that. So it was very similar. So I ended up again just kind of going through that, and I was a volunteer coach for a long time, and then I decided I wanted to, step into an assistant wrestling coach role, and then eventually a head coach role, which I was a head coach for 6 years.
Did you enjoy that?
Yes, yeah. I mean, so
that's that's a conditional
there's,
yes.
my gosh, when I think back about coaching in general, like, what did I enjoy the most out of it?
Hmm.
I enjoyed, if we're talking about the sport specifically, I enjoyed showing moves and learning moves
Mhm.
and teaching kids moves and techniques and strategies and game plans with grappling and wrestling. I also enjoyed, the laughs that we had and the camaraderie and the lifelong friendships that I've made and the connections I made with the kids. But there's a whole background story and a strong opinion about the state of public education for me. and coaching through the school system, and just some things that I just absolutely don't agree with. And I decided to leave the school system for the most part because of lack of support from administration. I mean, there's other things too, but and that went hand in hand with coaching, because I was a head coach for the school that I was a teacher. And yeah, I mean, I love coaching. And, right now I'm teaching judo, and I don't really have to worry about too much of the back end stuff, the behind the scenes type of thing. The gym owner is very trusting in me, which I feel very lucky and fortunate for that. And he lets me run the judo program how I want to.
Mm,
I don't really push competition. I might mention, a tournament or two coming up, or, this is more a competitive mindset or whatever, but I'm just kind of teaching as the art.
mm,
And, when you add the aspect of competition, and again, this goes back to what I was talking about with the last time I was on a podcast, was with organized school sports. Competition is always going to be kind of the centerpiece.
yep.
If you're on a baseball team, you're going to play baseball games. If you're on a football team, you're going to play football games on Friday night, or I think Thursdays is JV. But in wrestling is the same, right? Like, you're going to be on the wrestling team. That means you're going to be on the mat at some point. Martial arts has a little bit of a trump card, to where there's individuals that might not ever compete.
Right.
You can't join a wrestling team and just say, I never want to compete. That's just not the way that it works. But with martial arts, you can. So I've taken a much more recreational approach to the way that I coach now. And I don't emphasize any sort of competition. I mean, if people want to compete, awesome. And I'm happy for them. And I do have a couple students that do. And, they ask me a little bit more competitive based questions, and I'm happy to help them. I'm happy to work with them. But it's a much more stress free environment when I'm supported, and I'm not very worried about competition and getting people ramped up, and, pushing people real hard for competition based privilege, or competition based scenarios.
Sure. You mentioned that you had done some competition as well in your judo career.
Mhm.
How and here's why I asked the question, because you brought up, you know, martial arts isn't inherently competitive in a tournament setting, but some martial arts are a bit more competitive philosophically in the way they are typically taught. And I see judo as one of those.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about your time in competition with judo and how important or unimportant that was to your development as a judoka.
So, and again, this is a discussion that I keep having with a lot of people as of lately, the last couple months. So, judo, the art, and you could substitute judo for, jiu-jitsu, sambo, karate, kickboxing, whatever you want to substitute it as. You have the art itself,
Mhm.
and then you have the sport. And as time goes on, it's starting to separate itself. Obviously, judo is the one that I have the most experience with and have studied the most. So you have the art created by Jigoro Kano in 1882 that was meant as a physical education tool for the people of Japan, and then later translated to the world. Jigoro Kano wanted to spread judo as a physical education tool and a self improvement tool to the world. Now, there was a little bit of a self defense aspect, because it is a martial art, so you are learning to defend yourself. Kano saw how dangerous Japanese jiu-jitsu was, and the things that were taught to the military and the police force sometimes end up with, people that, with broken bones, or sometimes killing, with these certain techniques. So we wanted to take Japanese jiu-jitsu and make it a little bit more practical and provide a little bit more of a safer environment so that anybody could practice it. And the one of the original philosophies was mutual welfare and benefit.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to have benefit not only for yourself, but you also want to benefit your partner. And what's welfare? Welfare is safety and happiness. So you want to provide a safe environment for your partner. So there's a little bit of a separation there. Now, as I was coming through the system, the martial arts system, the judo system, the judo clubs that I went to, just like the majority of the judo clubs in the United States and probably the world, what they do is based off of current IJF rules. What is the current rule set for judo? What grips can you have? What throws can you and cannot do? How long do you have to throw? How long can I hold this? How long do I got to pin somebody down? This is a pin, so I would do this. How do I get out of this pin? This is half guard. Do I go into turtle? Whatever it might be. So I came through as a competitor. So we were learning judo as the sport, and as the rules changed, what we did in the clubs also changed to match the current rule set. So again, as I'm coming through, I have a different view than I do now, right? Like, I like the competitive aspect. One of my favorite things to do when I was younger and when in my competition days was the live aspect called randori.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be my favorite part of practice, to where I could try to, take somebody down or submit them or pin them, within this controlled environment. But we're trying our best, right? A controlled scrimmage, a controlled fight, whatever you'd like to call it. And I loved it. I love competition. I've always been involved in sports my entire life. I mean, I was on the t-ball field and the basketball court and things like that as long ago as I can remember. And when me and my friends would get together, we would play sports together. So I mean, I always loved it, and was a very competitive person for a long time. And as I came through and competed as a white belt, all the way up through a brown belt, I enjoyed it. I was able to travel to different parts of the United States, maybe to, I don't know, we'll just say maybe 10 states total. I was able to compete, as well as go to camps and clinics and things like that. And I liked it. But there are levels to competition in judo, especially because judo is an Olympic sport, and there are professional judo players in the world. Now, you don't see it as much in the United States. It is better now than it once was, but there are paid professional judo players, and they're trying to win world championships, and they make money, and their country that they're from pays them money if they win these big tournaments, or if they win a medal in the Olympics or even make it to the Olympics. They
Right.
get money to do so. So those would be their well, I'm not sure if they're still called this or not, but they used to be called A tournaments. So point tournaments, A tournaments, that's the top echelon. I don't know if I ever competed in an A tournament or not. Um, maybe a couple B tournaments, but most of them were just like at the amateur level, the
Mm-hmm.
regional level. Me just going to a tournament that just had people from an hour or 2 hours away, and I was just competing against people my own level. So I never got up to that high level to where I was trying to win a national championship. I mean, because honestly, I mean, I wasn't that caliber. I wasn't that good. Um, because I mean, when you, and I've been introduced to the hard way of some of these top level players, and man, they are a different animal, man. They're way better than I ever was and ever will be. But I competed at more like the amateur circuit and enjoyed it. Never won any money doing it or anything. I got a box full of medals sitting in my closet, which is cool. But just the fact that I went out there and did it and had a couple successful tournaments that I did really well in, and got a couple state level medals, which is kind of cool. I feel pretty proud about that, and happy that I was given that opportunity, and that I just had a couple really good tournaments, and brought something home that that I can talk about.
Nice. Cool. Yeah, I find the subject of Olympic competition always pretty interesting because my understanding is that the United States compensates Olympic athletes the least. That there are plenty of other countries that once you are even in a junior Olympic program, you're good to go. We're going to make sure you're taken care of and you can focus on your sport and all the development you
Mm-hmm.
need. And if you win a medal, you're compensated well. They want to look good on that global stage, and we just
Mm-hmm.
don't seem to make that a priority, which is a bummer.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, and I mean, a lot of people are in agreement to this. The United States kind of just stays within its own boundaries. The U.S. is a gigantic country compared to most countries in the
Hmm.
world, and we kind of just pay attention to what's going on here, and a lot of the world does too, when it comes to music or movies or some of the professional athletes and stuff like that. We kind of stay within our own,
Hmm.
and I don't even remember what the point I was trying to make for this was,
I'm going to guess that
but
you were working to say that because the U.S. is so physically large that sometimes we can
mm,
forget that other countries are out there and we just kind of do our own thing within competition.
yes, we do absolutely. And the and it's interesting too, because it's not like the US as a whole doesn't pay certain athletes pretty well. I mean, all the NBA players, I mean, this is a guess, but I would assume that all of them maybe start out at $1 million, maybe close. Football, baseball, similar stories, maybe not as high of money, but I mean, a good salary. I mean, everybody that plays professional sports is going to make big money in the United States when we talk about basketball, baseball, and football for the most
Those
part.
minimum contracts are big compared to what most of us make as our our
Sure.
general life salaries. I don't
Yeah.
know if a minimum contract in football is worth it because you're getting the snot beat out of you for I think it's 400K.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, again, that was just a guess on what they make or
Yeah.
whatnot. But all of these organizations are privately ran.
Yes.
The NFL, the MLB, NHL, all of them are run by private organizations. They are not run by the government.
Right.
A lot of, well, I don't. Again, this is a guess. I'm not sure, but I know there's a lot of countries in the world that all the sports that are held within the country are run through government funded centers. The US, we play sports through the school system,
Hmm.
and people are in middle school and they compete for their middle school program. Now obviously there are clubs out there that you can join just about in every sport, but you also have the option to play for your school. A lot of the world does not have that. It's, if you want to be part of a sports team, you join the local government run, facility, similar to like a YMCA, I guess, but it's run
Yeah.
through the government. So that's one major difference. Um, that the money that these athletes from other countries are getting paid is actually from the government directly, and the money that athletes make in the United States, as far as I know, none of them are paid through government. It's all done through these private organizations, big organizations, but they're still privately owned. They're not owned by the government.
Right. And then you've got the whole pro versus amateur
Mm,
discussion, right? And we've
sure.
seen collegiate sports finally, we figured some things out with that. And it really is a fascinating subject. The idea that if you're really good at something, the ability to make a living doing it can be really challenging. And, you know, you go back over the years of this podcast, and we've had a variety of people come on who have made martial arts their job. But their job is most of the time one of about three things. They have a martial arts school, they work in TV or film, they make stuff, like we make stuff, so like books or a podcast or training equipment or something, right? Like that's about it. And then you've got some people who do okay with seminars, but the majority of people doing seminars, they're not making a living. Whereas, yeah, you look at other countries where, in some countries, just to be any kind of martial arts instructor, you have to be certified by that country's athletic board. But there are more opportunities. What would martial arts look like in this country if the top, I don't know, 3, 5, 10% of judo players made 150, $250,000 a year? Because I'm guessing nobody's making that in the
Barely.
in the like open point tournament striking art world, which is what I'm more familiar with. The very, very best people, unless if you take out the sponsorships for logistics, right? Like some of them have sponsors that fly them and hotel rooms and everything and cover their fees. The only way they're making any money, yeah, they might win, $1,000 in a weekend at a competition, maybe $2,500 if it's a huge one.
Yeah.
But they're teaching some seminars. They've got to cobble together this professional athlete lifestyle to cover their bills in a way that other countries and other sports really don't have to do. And I hope one day we get there, because I think it would be amazing. What would martial arts competition look like in this country if we had professional martial arts competitors?
I mean, we do with MMA, but yeah, but as far as the traditional martial arts, there aren't many. But the one thing that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has done really well is fill that void that was kind of missing. So a lot of the big tournaments that Jiu-Jitsu has, they have prize money. People that are opening jiu-jitsu clubs are able to run that as a business for a living and don't have to work a second job.
Sure.
And it's a good pathway for some others to follow. I know we're both similar age,
Hmm.
but in the 70s and 80s, karate was gigantic in the United States, and there were karate schools that seemed like in every town,
Hmm.
and sometimes multiple in the same town. And people were making a living teaching karate, or maybe a taekwondo, something or something like that. And it shifted to now jujitsu. Um, the thing that I talk about with judo, and there's a lot of people that I listen to on social media within the judo realm, some high level competitors and people that actually do have big successful schools and are making $100,000 a year, but that's very rare
Hmm.
because the whole philosophy of judo from the beginning was to teach it as a physical education tool and to offer it to people for basically free. And while while that might have been an okay idea for the time frame that was happening in early parts of the United States and the world, such as like the world wars and things like that, to where so many people were living in poverty and literally didn't have enough money to do anything. It was great that judo was available for them as an
Sure.
outlet, but we're doing much better as a country financially. And the average person makes more money. We don't
Yep.
have this catastrophe, this world war that we're dealing with, to where we just have to survive. So it's different. And you mentioned about coaches being able to get paid a good amount of money to teach judo. So there's a lot of people in the community. One would be like Jimmy Pedro,
Hmm.
or Shintaro Higashi, Colton Brown, a couple pretty big people within the judo community, Roddy Ferguson. They all talk about how there are paths for people throughout the world in judo after they're done competing. There's ways to get paid coaching positions to where they make enough. I mean, they obviously don't get rich doing it, but they make enough to provide for their family, to pay their bills, and they could focus on coaching judo. They don't have to have this secondary job. They can just coach judo. And it doesn't necessarily have to be for a national team. It could just be at one of these government ran centers, like I
Hmm.
talked about, and you could just be teaching youth judo and making enough as a living. And there really is not an opportunity like that in the United States.
Right.
I mean, judo is small, obviously, and there are only so many coaching roles out there. I know that there's been a push in the past for judo to be offered in the school system and as an NCAA sport,
Mm.
which both of them obviously did not work out.
Yep.
Now, there are some schools within the United States that do have after school judo programs.
Hmm.
Um, you don't really see it as much anymore. And again, like, I could go into a deep rabbit hole about education, but the, you could take physical education 30 years ago and they might get out the mats and do wrestling as
Hmm.
a PE unit. My gosh, man, you try to do that today. I mean, you'll have parents trying to sue the
Yeah.
school over it,
Yep.
and which is absolutely ridiculous, but you know, but you could do martial arts or you could teach judo as a physical education curriculum 30 years ago. You can't do it anymore. And I love wrestling, but unfortunately, with the way that things are going, like I could see wrestling unfortunately fading away because of just how physical it is, and the perception of people that don't know anything about it that it's dangerous and things
Yep.
like that, because I mean it does look like a controlled fight in a way, but again, it's like I don't want that to happen, and I hope that I'm wrong. But it's like again with the trajectory that schools are going, I could see them taking it out because, like,
Sure.
but just because how physical it is.
It may not. If you look at the numbers, everything I've read about youth football participation numbers are down because of the concerns of CTE.
Hmm.
And if you have kids with parents who would say, I'd love you to have that kind of aggressive, that physical, that really intense experience. I want you to be part of a team. To me, if I don't want my kid to have quite that much physical injury risk, the first thing I'm going to look at as an alternative is wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there's an
I mean,
opportunity in there. And just for anybody out there in the audience, if you can speak to this, if anybody out there is following this subject well, I want to hear from you, please.
no, I love wrestling. I mean, I love grappling in general. I mean
Mm,
that's kind of my mission. Is I feel that I want to just try to get as many people involved in
mm,
grappling. Period, and whether it's seeing kids or adults or whatever. Sometimes I mention some kids. I said, that I think that kid should go out for wrestling just
mm,
because the way they move, the way that they're built, just
mhm.
whatever it might be. Other times I say, I think that kid would be great for judo, or I think that kid would be great for jiu-jitsu, or to just get into martial arts in general, whether it's karate or taekwondo or whatever it might be,
Yeah,
boxing, just as a good outlet to learn self control and to learn discipline and, you know, to teach what martial arts really teaches is that it's more of a competition against yourself.
sure.
And the more that you're in it, the more you realize that it's not about fighting and it's not about the self
Mm,
defense. And you want to use it in a real life scenario the least amount of as least as you can, if not ever, to use it. It's always going to be
sure.
that last resort sort of thing.
Well, I'm curious. You mentioned that you teach judo out of a jiu-jitsu academy, and you were
Hmm.
doing judo before BJJ had really gotten big. From my outside perspective, because I did a whopping 3 months of each at different times in my life, it seems like BJJ is one of the best things that's ever happened to judo. Would you agree? At least in this country?
um,
Oh, he has mixed feelings about this.
I, I absolutely do. One thing that I want to say before before I give my opinion about this is that I'm a jujitsu practitioner.
Sure.
I'm a blue belt in jujitsu. There's certain things that jujitsu has taught me as a martial artist that I love. I feel that it's definitely helped my judo and it's helped slow my judo down, but in a good way.
Hmm.
And I'm happy for jujitsu, and I'm glad that it's doing what it's doing and how popular it is. Now, the first thing that I want to say about it is the fact that I'm kind of shocked that judo has not exploded because of how big jujitsu has gotten, because it is a gi grappling art that has very similar strategies and points of emphasis, right? Take somebody from their feet to the ground, control them, and submit them. Judo does have the pins, but a pin is a version of control. So it both goes into that realm of taking somebody from their feet to the ground and controlling them on the ground. It's the same principle.
Hmm.
Now there's obviously different techniques, and again, like if you view it as the sport aspect, there's different rules. But unfortunately, judo is not kind of riding on the coattails of jiu-jitsu. And like I said, I'm shocked that it hasn't. I think that one of the reasons that it's not exploded is because it's not marketed the same way that jiu-jitsu is. Now, the whole idea and philosophy and statement of jiu-jitsu is for everyone, that comes directly from judo
Hmm.
because Brazilian jiu-jitsu came from judo.
Right.
One of Jigoro Kano's students, Count Maeda, which I can't remember what his first name is, but and I don't know what he was a count of exactly, but he brought judo to Brazil because
Hmm.
Kano. decided that he wanted to take judo and spread it throughout the world. So one of his students, Count Maeda, took judo to Brazil and taught it to the Gracies, and then it changed into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, what it is today. Now, and again, like I have these discussions, so a lot of the jiu-jitsu videos that you see is taking the technique, explaining it nice and slowly by a middle-aged man, taking it step by step, talking about how easy it is. This is what you do, this is what you do, and anybody could do this, and this is how you use it against somebody that's bigger and stronger than you. Whenever you see videos of judo, you almost always just see the high level competition side of it, to where you have these professional athletes that are freaks of nature with their speed and their strength and their stamina and their endurance and their flexibility, doing these insane throws and doing whatever they can to put their opponent on their back. So while it's cool to look at, the majority of people are like, I can't do that. It's
Right.
cool to watch, and I like watching it, and judo's cool to watch, but I could never do judo
This is
because I
one of the
can't
biggest
do that. And
mistakes we make as an industry, is showing the high level stuff and people not being able to see themselves in it. Please continue.
and that's why jiu-jitsu is, that's one of the reasons why jiu-jitsu is also so popular, because of how much it's pushed as it's for everybody. So, one of my missions, as far as what I want to do for judo, is get it back to that grassroots level and talk about how it is for everybody. And you could take where I teach, for instance, 4M Fitness in Indian Trail, North Carolina. There's probably, I don't know, I'd say close to 200 members that are there for jiu-jitsu alone. It's a big place. It's like, I'm very, it's a successful business. Davis Fleming is the owner. He's done very well. Kathleen Foster is the other owner. They've done very well. I'm very happy for them. And they've brought me on as a judo instructor, and like I cannot thank them enough for the opportunity that they've given me. But even within the confines of the jiu-jitsu gym, I can only get, 3, 4, 10, 12, 15 people on the judo mat.
Yeah.
And even people that I know, that I've trained with, that I've rolled with, that I've done stand up against, tell me, well, I don't want to come to judo because I don't want to get thrown on my head all the time. And I'm like, have you gone against me on the feet? Yeah. Did I ever throw you on your head? Well, no, but you're a black belt and you're being nice. And I'm like, well, if you come to class, you'll see, man. I mean, I got 40, 50s, even a 60-year-old man that's in my class, and we don't really practice that competitive, hard throw style that you see on the Olympics. I practice the art, and we break down the throws nice and slow. I bring out the crash pad. And back to what I was saying, one of the missions that I think is super important is to let people understand that judo is for everyone, and the techniques can be used by people of all sorts of physical abilities, age, sex, it doesn't matter. The whole premise of judo was to provide a physical education for everyone. And I think that it's definitely been misperceived. And I think that that should be one of the main things that is going to help judo grow in this country, is to promote it as that. And unfortunately, some of the bigger organizations, they're so concentrated on these big events and showing the Olympics and the World Championships and the Pan American Championships, that they don't really invest any time promoting the grassroots aspect of judo. And I think that that's a gigantic mistake, by all of the U.S. organizations that are in charge of judo currently.
Yeah. The number one thing that we see that benefits any martial arts club of any style. I do some consulting work, and we've got Whistle Kick Alliance, so I'm pretty involved in this stuff. Is showing pictures of and video of everyday people training in your school.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
and I've seen instructors say, "Oh, I can't show that picture. They're not my student's not doing that perfectly."
Mhm. Yeah,
Right?
sure.
No, it's the wrong approach. You want to show them
Mhm.
doing it imperfectly because that means
Yeah,
it's okay to be imperfect, and that means people will try and they'll say, "Oh, I guess I'll give this a whirl." As cool as it was, I don't know if you remember a couple years ago, there was this Taekwondo demonstration, and they were doing breaking, and they were vaulting each other up into the air and doing these backflip kicks and everything. Did you see
Mhm.
that? Super cool. But if someone
Yeah.
shows that to me and says, "That's Taekwondo. That's really cool. Do you want to do that?" No, I don't want to do that. As someone who's
Right.
trained in Taekwondo, I don't want to do that.
Sure, sure.
It's a marketing problem.
It can be absolutely. But the Taekwondo, um, I again, like I don't have the statistic in front of me right now, but I think that Taekwondo has to be. I mean, it might be the biggest in the United States. I'm not sure
It's
about what jiu-jitsu
believe it
is
or not,
currently.
I did the research. We have what I'm pretty sure is the most definitive data on this on our website. So if you saw me go and typing, that's what I was doing because I was pulling up the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
In the U.S., Taekwondo is second to karate, but not by much.
Okay. Yeah. Well, there we go. They've done pretty good marketing as well.
Mhm.
And I would say that the majority of the time too, when you look at a Taekwondo website, it is that friendly people. It is kids smiling,
Mhm.
having a good time. When I was talking to Shintaro Higashi when I was up in New York, he said that there's a taekwondo school right next to his house, and they do like kids parties, and they'll get out a cake and cut it with a samurai sword, and like you can rent out the space to do stuff, and like it's encouraged as just a fun place to be. It's just so
Mm.
happens they teach taekwondo, but it's like it's a cool fun place to be. We do these fun activities. It's kid friendly, and they've done a good job with that as well. And again, it's like if judo wants to get bigger, we have to like step away from the gigantic competitive aspect of it, because judo, just like the rest of the martial arts in the world, except maybe MMA, because again, that's kind of focused around like the competitive aspect. If you take that out of the equation, 90% of people that practice martial arts do not compete, maybe even higher. 95% do not compete.
I would say at any given time, yeah,
Yeah.
it's higher.
So, judo's the same. So if 90% of the people in judo don't compete, why is it that you only want to show highlights of the national championship um, and the Olympics? It's
I'm
like
broken.
why are these organizations not going around to grassroots level things and just like interviewing just a random kid or a random 40-year-old adult that's competing in the white belt division for the first time, and just like showing these successes, or telling these stories about how whatever, like somebody was going through trauma and they did judo and it saved them, or you had an adult that wrestled 20 years ago and hasn't really found anything to do, and then they found judo again, and it's like revitalize them and help them lose weight. Now they can compete again, or just whatever. It's like there's all these great stories and things that they could focus on that are not these high level competitions, because And jiu-jitsu and taekwondo and karate, they all focus on the grassroots, the everyday person, and it's really helped them boom in the United States.
For sure. We're going to start to wind down. You mentioned something pretty important at the top. You have a podcast. Tell us about your show.
So my podcast, The Well-Rounded Grappler, is something that I just do for fun. I don't have any sponsors. I don't have any revenue coming in from them, and I'm perfectly okay with it. So it's an interview based podcast, and I talk to individuals from the world of judo, sambo, jiu-jitsu, and wrestling, from the high level competitors, Olympic level competitors, all the way down to the everyday individual. It kind of just depends on who I want to reach out to and talk to. And we have usually hour-long discussions, and I go into a whole bunch of different aspects. I don't want it to be the same sort of interview every time. Sometimes I ask people, tell me where you grew up, tell me when you first started judo or wrestling, tell me about your first competition. But other times I definitely don't do that. Like I ask completely different questions. It might be about philosophy. It might be about opening a school. It might be about just a whole bunch of stuff, coaching, whatever it might be, where they've been in the world. So the first 50 episodes that I did were audio only. And after that, I kind of took a little bit of a break because, again, like I do it for free and my audience is small, and it just kind of depends what I'm doing is how much time I invest in the podcast. But as of like the last maybe like year of the podcast, a lot of people, well, not a lot, but like a handful of people were like, do you have a video? Do you have any video for this? Is it on YouTube? This and that. And since then, I've kind of started doing the podcast again, and now I offer a video as well as audio. A couple of them, well, actually, the last three was me going up and training up there, or one of them was doing a clinic. And after I was done training or doing the clinic, we sat down and I interviewed them in their own dojo.
Nice.
A couple of the ones that I'm going to do in the future will be kind of just online like this, Zoom or Google Meets or whatever it might be. And I'm going to start posting video as well. But then I'm also going into the realm of providing, clips, whether it's audio with some cool video that I found on judo or wrestling or jiu-jitsu, whatever it might be, or video clips from the actual episode of the individual saying something cool or something funny or something motivational. But I think that overall, and again, like I said earlier about when you're going through the process and you kind of look back, you realize that some things that were happening you didn't realize at the time were going on. So I just like doing it, and I like talking with individuals about martial arts, and I throw and wrestling is in there, and wrestling is a martial art. And I try to figure out how I can, become a better instructor, or how I can get motivation, or how I can find something to relate with people. Or some of the discussions are how to improve your business, or what I can do to start when I open the doors to my dojo, how I can have success with that, and ways to keep the door open and get people to try judo and things like that. But I love doing it, and I love networking with people. And some of the people that I've talked with, I've went and visited their club and trained, or
Awesome.
maybe got a private from them or whatever. And it's just been a great opportunity. And there has to be more avenues and opportunities to spread grappling and martial arts, because the thing that's wonderful right now about technology, or the availability to information, is the fact that if there's a famous judo player, or karate competitor or instructor, a kickboxer or whatever, there's probably going to be an interview of them on YouTube.
Mm,
Now, if you look back 20 years, the top level judo players in the United States, I mean, they weren't going on ABC or Good Morning America and talking about their judo experience. So,
right.
like, the resources weren't there. I mean, I could buy a VHS tape and I could watch them like do some instructing and listen to them talk, but it's not like it is today. So that's the great thing, is
Mm,
that you do have opportunities to find individuals that you want to hear from, famous judo athletes or MMA athletes or just whoever.
mm-hmm.
And you could find these interviews and watch them practice and demonstrate stuff. And that didn't really exist 20 years ago. So
It's true.
anytime that I can promote grappling, that I provide an opportunity for somebody to listen to either me or my guest and help them on their own personal journey, that's kind of what it's about for me. Because, like I
Mm,
said, like I'm an educator by nature. I like to teach. I like it when the light bulb comes on and
mm,
people understand it,
yeah.
whether it's judo or whether it's in the classroom, and they understand,
Mhm.
comprehension of a paragraph or whatever it might be, or in the physical education classroom to where the kid figures out how to score with the lacrosse stick or whatever, and they get real happy about it. It's cool, and that's kind of what it's all about to me, is providing these opportunities for people. And me being a no-name guy that just likes to teach, if I can say something and people want to listen to it, then that makes me happy.
Nice. And where would people find that show, your podcast?
All of the episodes are on Spotify,
Okay.
and I've started, and it's called the Well-Rounded Grappler.
Mhm.
And I've started to upload them to YouTube now as well.
Oh, great.
Now, the newest episodes, which I've only had three that are video, so all three of those are on YouTube, and
Mhm.
I'm slowly putting the old episodes on there, but it's not video, it's just audio. So it's just a
Our early
picture.
ones, our early ones are like that too. Yeah.
Yeah. But going forward, they're all going to be video.
Oh, that's great.
And another thing, and I mean, it's a big time commitment. And it's definitely a learning process for me because I'm not very good with video editing. But I've also taken some time to, like videotape like the dojo and do like a little tour of it or
Mm.
whatever. And I'm also like putting that online
Oh,
as
cool.
well, of places that I've been. And just again, like just trying to spread grappling, mostly judo, but again, whether
Mhm.
it's or martial arts in general, whether it's wrestling, jiu-jitsu, judo, or if it's a striking art, like I encourage people to learn about it, to understand, and to try it out.
Yeah. Right on. I'm going to have you close us up in just a minute. So you might think about what your
Okay.
final words to the audience are today. But my words to the audience, thank you for being here. Thanks for spending some time with Cole and I. And remember, support Kataro, KATAARO.com, all the good stuff that they do. Use the code WK10 for your first order. Remember, they also have a wholesale program for those of you out there with schools. Cole, Thank you again for being here. And this is your episode, my friend. So, how do you want to end things?
Well, obviously, thank you so much for considering having me on.
Of course.
Just like I did for you, I sent out an email to several different martial arts podcasts, some that I listen to, others that I know are spreading a similar message to what I want to spread. And I'm just happy that I'm able to come on and talk about what I love. So, first of all, thank you so much for having me on.
Okay.
Again, like I don't have the accolades, but without a doubt, I can confidently say that I have a passion for
Hmm.
this. So thank you so much. As far as what I want to say is, there's opportunities out there for people, and you don't know until you ask or until you try it.
Hmm.
I didn't know that I could have Olympic caliber athletes on my podcast till I asked. I didn't know that I could be a judo instructor until I asked. I didn't know that I could be a guest on a podcast until I asked. I could go on and on and on and on and on. But if you are interested in doing something, especially if you're passionate about it, you love it, and the intentions are pure, try to go after it and try to see what opportunities are out there. Because if somebody says no, then you're the same as what you were before. But there are opportunities to where people are going to say yes. So don't be afraid to just put your name out there and just try to pursue things that you love. And it doesn't have to be confined to martial arts or to grappling or to your career or anything. You know, you need to just take the step, no matter how scared you are, embarrassed you are, to where you might think, well, I'm not good enough, or I don't have the accolades, or who am I to reach out to this big organization or this
Hmm.
this big company or this famous person. Just reach out, and eventually you're going to get that yes that you have waited for. But you'll never know until you get out there and try it.